The Ukrainians managed to extend their foothold in Belgorod by a little bit, while in other parts of the front line they remain under pressure. This while the Ukrainian General Staff is giving additional information about the strike on the Engels Air Force Base, their assessment in this video, as well as the new draft of the resource agreement that the Russians are offering, which could be described as a colonial treaty, but we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Surfshark VPN is sponsoring this channel for this month. If you want to bypass geo-blocking or hide your internet activity all with a convenient app, then use Surfshark VPN for just $2.09 a month by using my link. You get 4 months extra as well. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this channel. The Ukrainian General Staff said in the attack on Engels Air Force Base, 96 cruise missiles, very likely KH-101, were destroyed, as well as the strategic fuel reserve on the base. According to calculations, that should mean $1 billion in worth in military goods was destroyed. No claims in regards to destroyed or damaged bombers, though. In total, this billion does not even include the damage to the infrastructure itself. The Ukrainians are saying the Naftogaz production facilities for natural gas were attacked by Russia on the 27th. Also, the Poltava oil and gas production facilities were attacked on the 28th, as well as energy infrastructure in Kherson on the 28th. All of those would theoretically be violations of the energy infrastructure ceasefire that is claimed to be in effect. The Russians, on the other hand, also claim the Ukrainians broke it with attacks on energy infrastructure in Kursk, Bryansk, and Saratov. This, at least according to the Russians. We switch to the developments along the front line, and we start off here close to Kursk, and in Kursk itself, the Russians have advanced further in Basivka. We have geolocations of them in the western part here, a little bit further than they've recently been, and here we see them now in the eastern part of Basivka, now a confirmation that they've gained a foothold in this as well. The Russians, on the other hand, have managed to reach the border post of the international border between Russia and Ukraine that is on the main road towards Sucha. So, and in the video it shows them raising their flag, meaning the Russians have reached this point here and now have it under control there as well. Further to the southeast, the Russians have also advanced in the town of Guyevo. We have geolocations of this as well, that here they are on the eastern part, and interestingly enough, this would be here. And in the pro-Ukrainian deep state map, this is also already now contested according to them. So probably half of Guyevo is now contested at the very least. The Ukrainians continue to get pushed back away, continue to be pushed out of Kursk. Further, a little bit to the southeast, the Ukrainians have advanced west of Demidovka. They have entered the town of Pokrovsk and are here in the eastern part of it. We have a geolocation of this as well. It's confirmed by Russian mill bloggers that report that fighting for the town continues. So according to them, the Russians are still inside of the town, but this would mean that the Ukrainians might have extended their foothold here in Belgorod a little bit south of their positions inside of Kursk. That's it from the Kursk region. We switch to Kharkiv. Nothing to report here, no change in territory. On the eastern front, we have geolocations of the Russians close to Seleny High. This is up here at this point. My mistake, it is a little bit further south here at Seleny High. We have the Russians in a position directly east of it. This is not really well visible on the map here, but it should be probably at this point indicating an additional advance. The Russians have also advanced further south, and here they managed to gain a foothold by first advancing north in this direction, and also at this point now they have reached positions close to Nove. This is on the map here. They've reached a position. If we see, those are the two formations that we see here, meaning they've roughly reached this point here, extending their foothold west of the Sherebets River and advancing further in the western direction from these positions. That's it north of the Seversky Donetsk. South of the Seversky Donetsk, I do not see any change in territory, neither in the Seversk direction nor in Chasiv Yar. From Ukrainian side, we have reports that the Russians have increased their usage of gliding bombs and of fiber optic drones in Chasiv Yar itself, but they also say that the Russian infantry is very badly trained and instructed, and at the same time they are attacking at small groups. So from their point, an intensified number of strikes with bombs and drones, but the infantry isn't of the highest quality here, and thus no confirmation of Russian advances in Chasiv Yar. From Toretsk, we have a huge number of fresh geolocations indicating where the Russians have advanced. First, we start off at Drushba. Here we have the Russians now directly north of Drushba. This should be roughly at this point here where the Russians have advanced. We also see them close to Kotline. This is at this point here. Krimske. I don't know why I have a Kotline in my script. Here at Krimske. They are in the northeastern part, and they are also in the waste heaps west of the mine here. So at this point, having also roughly reached this location here. They also are extending their foothold in the forest here and have left the city to the southwest. So now the Russians have gained a foothold here according to the geolocations, and we have them also reaching here the waste heaps in the southeast. This is at this position more or less where the Russians have also advanced over the past couple of days. Further south, fighting has been observed in the southern quarters of Toretsk itself, and this video seems to indicate that the Russians have won this engagement, roughly happening here, but it would also prove that the Ukrainians were still in that position here. The Russians also were striking positions here, and this would indicate us that the Ukrainians have full control over Shcherbinivka at this point, as we have various points of hits by Russian artillery indicating consistent Ukrainian presence in this area. A Ukrainian military spokesperson also said the Russians are using green armbands in Toretsk itself to make drone pilots from the Ukrainian side not be sure whom they are attacking, as the Ukrainians are using green and blue armbands with the intent to allow identification of friend and foe. It's unclear whether that surmounts as perfidy, but the Russians have proven and have admitted themselves of using perfidy in the past. We switch to the Pokrovsk area, and here we have the Russians again in the north of Lysivka that we have here. We have a geolocation of Russian presence here in the northern part of it. And we have the Ukrainians advancing in the direction of Kotline, a Ukrainian counterattack being successful. I have the geolocation of roughly this point here. Whether or not the Ukrainians managed to retake full Kotline, as we see here in the pro-Ukrainian deep state map, that I cannot confirm as of now. It might be possible, but I do not have visual evidence for this. The Russians in general are being reported to have re-intensified their attacks. The Ukrainians are reporting of more activity and that the activity is still increasing. The Ukrainians were also reporting of a single attack with 40 motorcycles, where the Russians apparently tried to overwhelm the Ukrainians and use the open field for a rapid advance. According to this, in this case, it would have failed, but it shows us Russian adaptations to the current events and, of course, their limitation in heavy armaments, trying new tactics here as well. In the Kurakhove direction, we have further Russian advances in the area of between Troitske and Kotlyarivka here. We have a geolocation of this as well, where the Russians are even a little bit west of it already. at this point here. This means the Russians managed to roughly advance 3.5 kilometers towards the west here, bypassing Kotlyarivka and Troitsk at this point, but a significant advance by the Russians in the context of the current war. Further south, the Russians have advanced into towards Bodanivka here, a little bit further south than the last advance. We have the Russians inside of the town itself here. No, that's the wrong one. This one was it. We have it here at the outskirts of Bodanivka, as you can see directly of the Zaporizhzhia, the small town in Donetsk that we have here. So the Russians have advanced until here and until here, probably extending the gray zone either like this or like this here and like this. We can't really say as of yet, because we only have the two locations, but it shows us that the Russians managed to gain further ground in this area. The Russians also advanced in north of Andrivka. We have a geolocation and a video of this here. At this point, it's directly north of Andrivka, where the Russians managed to gain positions up to here over the last few days as well. That was it from the Kurakhove area. I have nothing from Velika Novosibirsk and Orikhiv. I have nothing to confirm, nothing to report either. But in the Zaporizhzhia region, we have geolocations. First of all, we have the Russians in Shcherbaki, in the eastern town here, not Mali Shcherbaki, but in the eastern one, where we have them confirmed in houses in the center. So those are the southernmost houses, and they are already further north. And they have also advanced in Stepove, in the western part of it. We've seen them a couple of times here along the road. Now they have reached this point on the map. It is obviously up here roughly, and the western part should be roughly here. So we see additional advances in the Zaporizhzhia region. According to Konstantin Mashovets, a Ukrainian analyst and former colonel of the Ukrainian armed forces, the Russians have concentrated 70 to 72,000 men, 320 tanks, as well as 725 armored vehicles in western Zaporizhzhia. So those are the forces they are currently trying to advance in the Zaporizhzhia region with. That was it with territorial changes on the ground. Zelensky said that Putin is trying to waste time until a ceasefire comes in effect, to gain some more time to allow for a spring offensive into Sumy and Kharkiv. So according to Zelensky, the Russians want to advance roughly in those two directions, which would obviously change the situation on the ground and improve the Russian positions. The Russians, to which degree they will be able to use North Korean troops in this is unclear as of now, but we do have the South Korean military saying that the North Koreans have lost 4,000 men out of initial 11,000, but in January and February an additional 3,000 were sent, so the Russians have received additional North Korean reinforcements. North Korea is also sending additional missiles, shells and artillery pieces. Among that, a bigger number, a substantial number of short-range ballistic missiles. Among the systems being sent is this here, for instance, in total 220 170mm Koksan self-propelled artilleries are being sent, as well as 240mm MLRS. That is a domestic development by the North Koreans. All of this is being sent into Russia to help the Russians against the Ukrainians. From the Ukrainian side, we have an interesting report. A Russian mill blogger is writing here about the current situation with artillery shells, how it's set up and everything. And this part is quite interesting. As for the shell shortage, I will repeat myself. Quite unexpectedly, after the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and the defeat of the Syrian Arab Army, the Ukrainians acquired a very impressive number of shells of some types for Soviet systems. Now they can again, as in early 2022, fire a lot. So basically he's inferring that the Ukrainians have received artillery shells from Syria. There was a picture of likely a Ukrainian intelligence agency officer in Syria in connection with the rebels, that they might have repaid the aid they have received from the Ukrainians with artillery munition deliveries is quite possible, but so far I do not see any proof of this. Let's go to the political sphere, and that's going to be, the head of the Ukrainian presidential office says that both ceasefires, so Black Sea as well as energy infrastructure, were in effect on the 25th. But Zelensky said then that the negotiations, how to supervise them, are still ongoing. So according to that, the ceasefires haven't been implemented yet. The Russians already claimed that they immediately implemented it while continuing to strike energy targets. So all of this is somewhat unclear. The Russians are also insisting and emphasizing that the handover of control for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is here, that apparently Trump wants to, is unthinkable, and they don't even want to discuss it. So Zaporizhzhia will not be given to anyone else, let alone the Ukrainians. At the same time, Putin is once again emphasizing that, according to him, Zelensky is not a legitimate president. Nazis are still in the government. Just to put this into context, a nationalist right-wing extremist party has, I think, 2 local representatives. That's all of the parliamentary representation of the far right in Ukraine, and obviously the president is legitimate as according to the constitution. There are no new elections during martial law, and thus his presidency is extended, which is practice in a lot of other countries, among them my home country Germany, where all elections are stopped in case of war as well. Other than that, he insists that the reasons for the war have to be removed completely to sign a peace agreement. For that, he obviously does not mean himself, the reasons as a reason for this war, but basically the Western orientation of Ukraine. We talked about it in length in the past, but basically Russia wants Ukraine to be a satellite state of Russia and thus remove everything that thinks otherwise. At the same time, he proposed to put Ukraine under a governance of the United Nations, the United States, and the European to create a temporary government that would do democratic elections. Putin again shows with this that he's looking for reasons to let the negotiations fail, and obviously having an election campaign while soldiers are on the front line and while the politicians are fighting each other would be the last thing Ukraine needs as of now. But it was to be expected that the European Union would deny such a temporary government, which would then fail, which would then let his plan fail and give him more reasons not to sign a ceasefire. The Ukrainian constitution also doesn't allow for that, so Ukraine also declined any suggestions like this. But the news I found is that the United States also declined to do something like this. Right now, and also Putin wants to continue playing Trump. All of this shows that he wants to continue the war while not being too obvious as being the one who sabotages a ceasefire, after the Ukrainian president has publicly said he would be willing to do an unconditional ceasefire in regards to the Americans, to give Trump basically a sign that it won't fail with him. At the same time, a coalition of the willing has met in Paris. 30 nations, including France, Germany, United Kingdom and Ukraine were there. They decided to continue strengthening the Ukrainian defense industry. They want to deter future Russian aggression. Ukrainian is also the goal of this coalition, is to give Ukraine the best possible negotiation position for peace agreements. And Macron said there are plans to implement reassurance forces at strategic strategic positions inside of Ukraine in case of a peace agreement. So those forces would not be used to deter, of which Europe right now doesn't have the forces and strength to do that, but to help Ukrainians to train and to help train Ukrainians. They wouldn't be on the front line, but in general, and there was my mistake where I misread my script. I'm sorry for that. So those forces are not meant to be on the front line to stop the Russians there, but if they are being sent, they would train the Ukrainians and at the same time would be used as a deterrence, I guess, as a tripwire deployment in some case. So if the Western soldiers are all over Ukraine training Ukrainians, are in certain positions, then the Russians, if they restart the war, would very likely kill Western soldiers and thus potentially draw in their nations into the war itself. At the same time, on the other hand, the Greek Prime Minister, for instance, said that Greek is willing to deploy forces inside of Ukraine, but among this, they are not meant to be on the ceasefire line. They are not meant to be sent before a peace agreement, and Greece would only send it if there is an exfil plan in case of renewed aggression. So this would be an indication that the Greek Prime Minister is not willing to deter and fight in a new war, that they would probably only be there for training. So the current setup of that coalition of the willing isn't completely clear yet. But the biggest thing is probably the new minerals deal. And so the Ukrainians received a new draft for the minerals deal. And again, it was massively changed. The opportunities and the rights of the United States was massively expanded. According to the reports here, the new version includes crazy rules. Basically, the leadership of the fund will be 5 persons, 3 from the United States, 2 from Ukraine, which would make sure that nothing happens without US approval. The US claim that they already paid into that fund $100 billion since 2022 in form of their military aid. Ukraine would have to hand over future profits for gas, oil, minerals, and more into that fund. Ukraine is already saying there that they are not going to accept the $100 billion as a down payment, as an investment in said fund. And the agreement itself would be without an end datum. Only the US can leave the agreement. So the US could leave the agreement at any time. Ukraine would not. They would in perpetuity hand over their resource wealth of the complete nation to that fund controlled by the United States. The US in this context would initially receive its $100 billion to get it basically back, according to them, including an additional 4% interest per year. US can withdraw money from the funds at any time. Ukrainians can't. All income, including public as well as private, would be over the whole territory, including occupied and unoccupied, would be put into the fund. Private companies would not be excluded. So private companies already operating mines would have to hand over their profits to this fund. This money would then be exchanged to US dollars and would be put into an account in the US, so immediately withdrawn from Ukraine. US would receive the first right to the resources when they are sold, governmental side as well as private companies. So anything that's being produced in Ukraine, any resources would initially be sold to US companies and the US government if they wanted. Any future infrastructure projects would have to be offered to the fund for as an investment, whether it wants to do it, finance it, and run it itself, again under US control. Any future infrastructure, so any future nuclear power plant or whatever, would then be paid basically with Ukrainian resources, but under US control, where the US can withdraw money at any time. Only if the fund declines, other investors could be up for questioning, and it would include no security guarantees. So basically, it's a colonial treaty, but that would be a wrong description, as well as the masters of colonies used to fight for their colonies, which the US does not want to. So this makes it almost impossible for it to be signed. And the rumor, the questioning now is whether or not the US president changes this treaty to basically allow him a way out, as he understands that Putin is playing him. We talked about it quite a lot in the past, that basically the US is only demanding things from Ukraine. Ukraine is giving in a lot of parts, and Russia doesn't even agree with what it's being offered. They keep asking more. There's no pressure visible towards the Russians, which makes it likely that Putin doesn't even want war, which he probably doesn't even want peace, which he doesn't want to. And thus, this article here claims that Trump might slowly realize this and change the resource agreement in a way that guarantees the Ukrainians to decline it. And the agreement, if it's true, if this draft is actually the agreement the US is offering, Ukraine can't sign it. That would turn it into a colony, but worse than a colony. Because it wouldn't even include any aid. Any colony probably would have been treated better than this, and this would guarantee a Ukrainian refusal, or it should guarantee one, and this would allow Trump to basically leave all of it. He could say, I tried to help them, but they wouldn't let me, they wouldn't allow me, and thus would obviously allow him a way out. We'll have to see how this continues. We'll obviously are going to check it here on the channel. So if you don't want to miss it, I would invite you to subscribe to the channel. We have another few tidbit here. This is a heavier Ukrainian bomber drone, and interestingly enough, it carries a Starlink panel. So the Ukrainians apparently modify drones now to have a Starlink internet connection while using a combat drone. Also quite unexpected, at least for me. And we have something here where the French are having developed a new unmanned ground vehicle. It is armed with a machine cannon. And interestingly enough, it's going to be tested in Ukraine, according to this. We have it here. Réalisera aller-retour en Ukraine. So it's going to be sent to Ukraine and back as part of the testing. So in this context, it would probably mean that the Ukrainians, it's going to be tested along the front line to try out whether it can be jammed in other parts like this. In this context, interestingly enough, the French seem to be admitting that they are going to use prototypes in Ukraine for combat testing. But that was it from me for today. If you like this situation report, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. If you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Leave a comment if you have something to add. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.